The small town of Hollow Creek had always been surrounded by vast, open fields that stretched out as far as the eye could see. To the townsfolk, these fields were simply part of the landscape, a place where crops grew, children played, and life carried on as usual. But there was one field that everyone avoided, a lonely, overgrown expanse of land known as Widow's Field. Widow's Field had earned its name long ago, after the tragic death of a farmer's wife who had supposedly vanished there one foggy night, never to be seen again. Since then, the field had fallen into disuse, its grass growing tall and wild, and a strange, unsettling aura had settled over the land. The locals whispered about strange sounds and eerie sights, shadows that moved on their own, lights that flickered in the distance, and the faintest echoes of a woman's voice carried on the wind. Most people in Hollow Creek dismissed these tales as mere superstition, the kind of ghost stories that small towns seem to thrive on. But there were a few who believed the stories, who claimed to have seen or heard things they couldn't explain. And among those few was a young man named Evan. Evan had grown up hearing the stories of Widow's Field from his grandmother, who had always warned him to stay away from the place. She would tell him tales of the field's dark history, of how people had disappeared there, never to return, and of the creature that was said to lurk within the tall grass, waiting for its next victim. As a child, these stories had terrified Evan, but as he grew older, he began to wonder if there might be some truth to them after all. It wasn't just the stories that made Evan uneasy about the field. There was something about the place itself that unsettled him, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. Whenever he passed by Widow's Field, he felt a chill run down his spine, and the hairs on the back of his neck would stand on end. It was as if the field was watching him, waiting for him. And then there were the dreams. For as long as Evan could remember, he had been plagued by strange, unsettling dreams about Widow's Field. In these dreams, he would find himself standing in the middle of the field, surrounded by the tall, swaying grass. The air would be thick with fog, and the sky overhead would be a dark, ominous gray. And somewhere, just out of sight, he would hear a voice, a low, whispering voice that seemed to come from all around him. The voice would call his name, urging him to come closer, to step deeper into the field. And no matter how hard he tried to resist, he would always find himself moving forward, his feet carrying him deeper and deeper into the fog until he could no longer see the edge of the field. Then, just as the voice seemed to be drawing closer, he would wake up, drenched in sweat, his heart pounding in his chest. For years, Evan had tried to ignore these dreams, brushing them off as nothing more than the product of his overactive imagination. But as he grew older, the dreams became more frequent, more vivid, and he began to fear that there was something more to them, something real. One late summer evening, as the sun began to set and the sky turned a deep, bloody red, Evan found himself standing at the edge of Widow's Field. He had been out for a walk, trying to clear his head after a long day, but his feet had led him here, to the one place he had always tried to avoid. He stared out at the field, the tall grass swaying gently in the breeze, and felt that familiar chill creep up his spine. The air was thick and heavy, and the sky overhead seemed to press down on him, making it hard to breathe. For a moment, he considered turning back, but something, some unseen force, kept him rooted to the spot. As he stood there, the last rays of sunlight fading behind the horizon, he thought he heard something, a faint, whispering voice carried on the wind. He strained to listen, his heart pounding in his chest, but the voice was too quiet to make out, and then, just as he was about to dismiss it as his imagination, he heard it again, clearer this time. Evan. The voice was soft, almost gentle, but there was something in it that made his blood run cold. It was the voice from his dreams, the voice that had haunted him for years. And it was coming from the field. Evan, come to me. Before he could stop himself, Evan took a step forward, his foot sinking into the soft earth of the field. The grass brushed against his legs, and he shivered as a cold, clammy sensation spread through him. The voice called to him again, and he found himself moving deeper into the field, the tall grass closing in around him like a living thing. As he walked, the world around him seemed to grow darker, the sky turning a deep, inky black. The air grew colder, and the wind picked up, whipping through the grass with a low, mournful wail. But still, he walked on, drawn forward by the voice that echoed in his mind. "Evan. I'm waiting." He didn't know how long he had been walking when he finally came to a stop. The grass around him was taller now, almost as tall as he was, and the fog had grown thick, swirling around him like a living thing. He couldn't see more than a few feet in front of him, but he could feel the presence of something watching him from the shadows. And then, out of the fog, a figure appeared. It was a woman, tall and slender, her long hair flowing around her like a dark cloud. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes were black, empty voids that seemed to suck in the light around them. She stared at him, her lips curling into a cold, cruel smile. "Evan." She whispered, her voice echoing in his mind. "You've finally come." Evan tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He wanted to run, to turn and flee back to the safety of the town, but his feet wouldn't move. He was rooted to the spot, trapped by her gaze. The woman stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "I've been waiting for you, Evan," she whispered. "Waiting for so long." She reached out, her hand cold as death as it brushed against his cheek. "You belong to me now," she said, her voice soft and sweet. "You've always belonged to me." Evan felt a wave of terror wash over him as her words sank in. He tried to pull away, to break free from her grasp, but it was too late. The darkness closed in around him, and the last thing he heard before everything went black was her laughter, cold, cruel, and filled with a terrible hunger. And then, silence. The following morning, the town of Hollow Creek awoke to find that Evan was missing. His mother, worried when he hadn't returned home the night before, had gone out looking for him, only to find his footprints leading into Widow's Field, and disappearing into the tall grass. Panic quickly spread through the town as word of Evan's disappearance got out. The townsfolk, already wary of the field, now spoke of it in hushed tones, their fear growing with each passing hour. Search parties were organized, but no one dared to venture into Widow's Field, not even the bravest among them. The stories of the field's dark history were too deeply ingrained in their minds, the fear too great. Instead, they searched the surrounding woods, the nearby river, and every possible hiding place they could think of. But there was no sign of Evan. It was as if he had simply vanished into thin air. Days turned into weeks, and still, there was no trace of him. His mother, once a strong, vibrant woman, became a shell of her former self, consumed by grief and guilt. She would spend hours at the edge of Widow's Field, staring out at the tall grass, whispering her son's name over and over again. The town, too, was changed. People no longer ventured out after dark, and the once lively streets became eerily quiet as night fell. The fear that had always lingered in the background now hung over the town like a dark cloud, and the stories of Widow's Field grew more sinister with each retelling. Some claimed to have seen strange lights in the field at night, flickering like fireflies in the distance. Others spoke of hearing voices, soft, whispering voices that called to them from the darkness. And then there were those who claimed to have seen the woman, the one who was said to haunt the field, her black eyes watching from the shadows. But no one dared to enter the field, not after what had happened to Evan. The town knew better than to risk the wrath of whatever lurked within the tall grass. They had lost one of their own, and that was enough. Or so they thought. As the weeks passed, Evan's disappearance began to take its toll on the town of Hollow Creek. A palpable sense of dread hung in the air, and even the bravest souls in the town grew more cautious, their nerves frayed by the mystery and fear surrounding Widow's Field. The once vibrant community became a shadow of its former self, its residents gripped by a fear they couldn't shake. Despite the warnings and the eerie stories, one person remained determined to uncover the truth: Evan's older sister, Lily. Unlike the others, Lily refused to believe that her brother was gone for good. She was certain that there was more to his disappearance than the townsfolk were willing to accept. She had grown up hearing the same stories as Evan, but she had never been one to shy away from the unknown. Now, with her brother missing, those tales took on a new urgency. Lily spent every waking hour piecing together what little information she could gather. She spoke with the few townspeople who dared to speak about Widow's Field, probing for details they might have overlooked or forgotten. She combed through the town's archives, searching for any historical accounts that might shed light on the field's dark past. But the more she dug, the more she realized that the truth was shrouded in layers of superstition and fear. One night, after another day of fruitless searching, Lily found herself standing at the edge of Widow's Field. The moon was full, casting an eerie silver light over the landscape, and the wind whispered through the tall grass like a mournful sigh. Despite the overwhelming sense of dread that settled over her, Lily knew she had to do this. She had to find out what had happened to her brother. Taking a deep breath, Lily stepped into the field, the grass brushing against her legs like cold fingers. As she ventured deeper, the world around her seemed to change, the air grew thicker, the night darker, and the silence more oppressive. The familiar landmarks of the town disappeared behind her, swallowed by the dense fog that clung to the ground. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, but she pressed on, determined to find any clue that might lead her to Evan. As she walked, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that unseen eyes were tracking her every move. She glanced around, but saw nothing, only the endless stretch of grass and fog. Then, just as she was about to turn back, she heard it, a soft, whispering voice carried on the wind. "Lily." She froze, her breath catching in her throat. The voice was faint, almost indistinguishable from the rustling of the grass, but there was no mistaking it. It was the same voice that had haunted her brother's dreams. "Lily, come to me." Despite her fear, Lily felt an irresistible pull toward the source of the voice. It was as if some unseen force was guiding her deeper into the field, drawing her closer to whatever lay within. She knew she should turn back, that she should run before it was too late, but she couldn't. She had to find out what had happened to Evan. The fog thickened as she moved forward, swirling around her like a living thing. The voice grew louder, more insistent, and Lily could feel her fear growing with each step. But she couldn't stop now. She was too close. And then, through the fog, she saw it, a figure standing in the distance, barely visible through the haze. It was a woman, tall and slender, her long hair flowing around her like a dark cloud. Lily's heart skipped a beat as she recognized the description of the figure from the townspeople's stories. The woman turned to face her, and Lily felt a wave of terror wash over her. The woman's eyes were dark, empty voids that seemed to bore into her soul, and her lips curled into a cold, cruel smile. "Lily, you've come," the woman whispered, her voice echoing in Lily's mind. "I've been waiting for you." Lily wanted to scream, to turn and flee, but she was paralyzed by the woman's gaze. She could feel the darkness closing in around her, the weight of it pressing down on her, suffocating her, but even as the fear threatened to overwhelm her, she knew she had to stay strong. She had to find out what had happened to her brother. "Where is Evan?" Lily demanded, her voice shaking with fear. "What have you done with him?" The woman's smile widened, and she stepped closer, her movements fluid and unnatural. "Evan is with me," she whispered. "He belongs to me now, just as you will." Lily's heart pounded in her chest, and she felt a surge of panic. She had to get away, to escape before it was too late. But as she tried to move, she found that she couldn't. The darkness was closing in around her, trapping her in place. The woman reached out, her hand cold as death as it brushed against Lily's cheek. "You will be with him soon," she whispered. "Forever." And then, before Lily could react, the woman's hand closed around her wrist, and the world around her went black. The next morning, the town of Hollow Creek awoke to the news that Lily was missing. Her mother, frantic with worry, begged the townspeople to search for her, but they were too afraid. After Evan's disappearance, no one was willing to venture into Widow's Field. They had seen too much, lost too much. Days passed, and just like Evan, Lily never returned. The town became even more withdrawn, the fear of Widow's Field now all-consuming. The stories that had once been whispered in dark corners now became the stuff of nightmares, and the townsfolk did their best to forget that the field had ever existed. But there were those who couldn't forget. Evan and Lily's mother, her heart shattered by the loss of her children, became a ghost of her former self. She would spend hours at the edge of Widow's Field, staring out at the tall grass with vacant eyes, whispering their names into the wind. But there was no response, only the endless rustling of the grass, the soft whisper of the wind. Years passed, and Widow's Field remained untouched, its dark reputation growing with each passing season. The town of Hollow Creek slowly faded away, its population dwindling as more and more people left, unable to bear the weight of the fear that hung over them. The few who remained kept to themselves, avoiding the field at all costs, and the stories of what happened there became little more than distant memories. But the field itself remained unchanged, its tall grass swaying in the breeze, its secrets hidden beneath the surface. And on certain nights, when the fog rolled in and the wind whispered through the trees, the people of Hollow Creek would swear they could hear voices, soft, mournful voices calling out from the darkness. Voices that sounded like Evan and Lily. Voices that echoed through the night, a reminder of the terrible fate that awaited those who ventured too close to Widow's Field. And so, the town's final secret remained buried in the fog, lost to time and memory, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the edge of the light.